Considering the appropriations to the Minister for Financial Services, Commerce and Environment. But before we commence our proceedings of Finance Committee for today, I will ask Minister Kirkconnell to lead us in prayer. But before he does that, I will try to lay out the order of events for today. We will be taking our lunch break at about 12:30, 12:45. We'll return here at approximately 1:30, 1:45. And then we will take a mid-afternoon break, and we will also end or adjourn this evening at about 6 o'clock. I realize that members have other commitments on their calendars, so I'm just stating the schedule for today so that you can plan your life accordingly. I realize that the civil servants would also have other commitments, so you know that you're going to get your break at certain times. So without any further delay, I'll ask Minister Kirkconnell to lead us in prayer.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the privilege you've given us to be together here today in this house to do the country's business. Father, we ask you to bless each one of us here in Finance Committee, that we will be able to look at the accounts in front of us and work together, that what we accomplish meets with your wishes. Father, we ask you to continue to bless these Cayman Islands. Forgive us where we failed you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Please be seated. Gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, we are about to begin our proceedings, so if we could. We are considering appropriations to the Minister of Financial Services, Commerce and Environment. And we are now considering appropriation FSC 7, an internationally competitive financial services industry, $2,027,481 on page 157 of the annual plan and estimates. Page 157. Are there any questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Pollard.
I'd be obliged, Mr. Chairman, if we could deal with matters relating to which heading is that? The Auditor's Oversight Authority, which is AOA 1 on
Page 164.
Page 164. The Chairman is here to answer any questions that members may have on that, and he has a pressing engagement, which it would be useful to get him out of the way.
Thank you for the reminder, Mr. Pollard. Let us then proceed to consider the appropriations with respect to the Audit Oversight Committee. That appropriation is AOA 1, found on page 164. AOA 1, Auditor's Oversight, $315,000 on page 164. Are there any questions? Mr. McLean.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have many questions for Mr. Austin, but certainly the question that come to mind, the first one is the rules that is being developed, and when we can expect those.
Mr. Chairman, I am Michael Austin, and my role is Chairman of the Auditors Oversight Authority.
Thank you. Would you like,
Mr. Chairman, in answer to the question, the rules have been developed so far in draft form. The present situation is that we have to have the regulations in place, and these are being forwarded now to the appropriate sections in government so that they can be tabled. Once the regulations are in place, then we can forward the rules, which are in draft form, and then they can be adopted. And that's the order of the procedures.
Mr. McLean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, through you to Mr. Austin, in view of the fact that I know one of the reasons this was put in place was to maintain our position in this global financial environment, and to try and control, make sure our reputation stays intact. In light of all of that, and in view of some, I don't know what you call them, but I call them mishaps over the last year, we see a few people going to court and all that kind of stuff with this accounting thing, you know? I'm wondering if you are getting any resistance from the stakeholders in putting rules and, in particular, regulations in place, since it's still on the draft.
Mr. Chairman, through you, quite the contrary. The original pressure for bringing this legislation came from the accounting firms themselves. Rather than face inspections from the EU, from the Japanese, they felt that we had, as in Cayman Islands, to have our own authority, which would have be recognized by the EU with equivalency, and that authority then can operate in the Cayman Islands. So the pressure has come from the accounting firms themselves, from the stakeholders, and I think they quite accept that we have to have rules, and the rules have been discussed in detail with the Cayman Islands Society of Professional Accountants as we've gone along, and have their blessing and their input. So we won't be at loggerheads in that respect.
I am heartened by that. I must tell you. I wish we could do the same with some other organizations. Mr. Chairman, let me just say to Mr. Austin, thanks for your volunteer work. I note that you have been around here since Christ won the River Beach, so you understand the industry, and you understand what this country means to us as a people, and to us as a people not only as residents here, but to us as a people on the global front. And the importance of this cannot be overstated. Thank you very much, sir.
Mr. Chairman, through you, thanks to the member for those kind remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Austin. Are there any other questions? Mr. Bush?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One question, there's a small reduction on the budget. Can the minister say why? Since it's a new authority.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the member for the question. The reduction, the small reduction, as the member has noted, relates to startup costs that are not replicated in the coming, in this coming financial year. So those costs initially were paid out in the first financial year for the authority, but would not be replicated in the coming financial year. So that represents the small reduction in costs. I think in future, members will note that the costs associated with the Auditor's Oversight Authority will continue to decline because it will be developing entity revenue. At this point, it is not developing any entity revenue because it is not carrying out yet the functions. It is still putting in place the structure and the rules, and as the chairman noted earlier, the regulations to support the function of the authority. But I anticipate in the coming year that will be in place, and we will start seeing the functions being carried out and entity revenue being generated.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, recognizing that the reasons why we had to put this in place was due to the way things are done in the EU, have as yet begun to have any interaction with similar bodies. Or do we have any interaction with them?
Mr. Chairman, through you, I believe the question relates to whether we are dealing with any other bodies other than the EU. And if that's the case, we are in discussions with the Japanese authorities at this stage, who are also looking to, there are several auditing firms that do work for Japanese public companies, that is to say mutual funds. And so the Japanese are anxious that our auditing requirements meet their expectations, and they're looking to the Auditors Oversight Authority to become established so that we can have an MOU with the Japanese. But that's the only other body that I'm aware of that, that I know that that has a similar situation. In Europe, no.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. Are there any other questions with respect to the Audit Oversight Authority? If there are no further questions, we proceed to taking the vote. All those in favor of AOA1, Auditor's Oversight, $315,000, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Aye. Those against, no. Thank you, Mr. Austin.
I'm obliged for that, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Returning now to page 157 to consider appropriation FSC 7, an internationally competitive financial services industry, $2,027,481 on page 157. Are there any questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Bush?
I look at the budget and see that there is a $200,000+ reduction, while the forecast and the budget expectations, the forecast for 13-14 and the budget expectations for 14-15 are just about the same. How is this? How is the ministry expecting, and what are the parameters for that expectation to get that same result?
Mr. Chairman, through you, I thank the member for the question and the observation that there is a reduction. Mr. Chairman, this is a part of the exercise that government has gone through to reduce expenditures. This specific reduction relates to a renegotiation of the retainer agreement with the law firm Sidley & Austin, which has been advising government for some time now in relation to international financial regulation and other matters, both matters that are arising within the U.S. as well as globally.
Mr. Chairman, I didn't understand. I know he said something about Sidley & Austin. What does that have to do with the reduction? That's what I'm. Can you explain that? Oh, I didn't catch it. I'm sorry.
The budgeted items, through you, Mr. Chairman, under this heading included a figure. I don't have the exact amount to hand, but I can provide that. But it was somewhere around 800,000, in the previous budget. That has been reduced to 600,000 on the basis that the retainer agreement, as I mentioned earlier, has been renegotiated. Government is, and the ministry is taking more control over the expenditure under that heading with, or through that retainer agreement, and taking on more responsibilities in respect of keeping an eye on what's going on globally as opposed to just within the U.S.
Mr. Chairman, I understand in regards to Sidley Austin, we put them in place. If I understand correctly now, what you're saying is that you all are going to be doing some of that work yourselves. So you renegotiated the agreement down. That's what you're saying?
Mr. Chairman, through yes to the member, the ministry feels that we are more engaged and active within the European arena on financial regulation and issues which may be relevant to the financial services industry in Cayman. So it is at this point really the U.S. market that we are seeking to have that law firm which advises us to focus their attention under the terms of the original or the former retainer agreement. There was no mechanism really to control the expenditure. They essentially had a remit to advise and choose what matters they thought were important to the Cayman Islands. So the revised retainer agreement really attempts to give us more control over how that expenditure is incurred on behalf of the government, and we have asked that it be focused more in relation to the U.S. market. As I said, for the reasons that I indicated earlier, we feel that we have a better handle on what's going on in the European market and globally outside the U.S.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know what he said that they had the remit to choose what how they represented us, because whatever we asked them for, that's what they would do, and so they were directed from various points for various reasons, various matters on the work for us. They also have far reach into Europe, and I'm not going to sit here and say that they don't know what's going on in Europe, because that would be a serious statement. But if the ministry feels that they can do the work of Sidley and Austin in Europe, well, go ahead. Do you plan to have any other kind of representation in the European market, since you're saying that that is such an important market now?
Mr. Chairman, through you, the ministry will not have any specific engaged legal advice for the European market. I would imagine, and we have had discussions obviously with Sidley and Austin, they would certainly, if they think that there is a particular issue which comes to their attention from their global involvement, that they would bring the matter to our attention. And then we can make a decision as to whether to specifically engage them to give the government advice on that particular matter. And certainly that's the case with any other matter that perhaps comes to our attention. If we feel that we need specific regulatory advice in relation to that, we would engage someone to do that.
So,
but at this point, the ministry...
Which you would have to pay for?
We would have to pay for, yes.
Separate. Now, what we pay you, of course.
But in relation to the retainer, certainly the previous retainer agreement allowed the firm Sidley and Austin to effectively decide themselves what they were going to monitor and to come back and give advice in relation to that. Clearly, if we ask for additional advice and more in-depth reviews on particular issues, they would follow those instructions as well. So this is just an attempt to have greater control over our costs in that area, and we felt that it was useful to reduce that from the original 800,000 down to the 600,000 through a renegotiated retainer agreement and take more control of it.
Mr. Chairman, can the ministry provide a copy of that retainer agreement?
May I just clarify, Mr. Chairman, which one the member is referring to, the current or the former?
Well, I was interested in the former one since that was being referred to in the way it was, but since you mentioned the new one, that would be good too.
I think the member can have the assurance we'll provide that to him.
Yeah, both of them then. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. Any further? Mr. McLean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I don't know if this is the right name, but I knew it as the Financial Services Advisory Committee. Is that correct? The one that we had a number of people from the industry on that would advise the ministry.
That was I think that was called the Financial Services Commission, through you, Mr. Chairman.
No,
Or council, sorry.
I think
Council, not commission, because, yeah, okay. Is that still in existence?
That, through you, Mr. Chairman, that council has not been reconstituted or continued at this point.
And Mr. Chairman, is there any other council advisory committee or the likes that has been replaced that?
Mr. Chairman, I thank the member for the question again. There is a Financial Services Legislative Committee, which is comprised of industry representatives from a variety of areas of specialization in the legal profession. And they also have various subcommittees within that group as well, with specific areas of specialization. So that committee essentially provides advice, and they work on proposals for new financial services legislation, and they do some of the initial drafting to try to advance the process. And in that way, when it goes to the legislative drafting department, it will be more advanced, and we're able to get the product completed quicker. Obviously, it has to go through the process of caucus and cabinet approval first.
Mr. Chairman, can the minister tell us, he mentioned made up from different industry stakeholders. Can the minister tell us the composition and of each one of those that is represented there?
Mr. Chairman, to the member, I don't have the specific details, but I can certainly provide that. I think there is great flexibility in relation to how they function with the committees of specialization, and they certainly bring in other associations that are trade associations or organizations that are relevant to that particular area. But there is certainly the constituted Financial Services Legislative Committee, which I can give you the membership of. I just don't have it to hand at the moment. It is chaired by Mr. Charles Jennings, who is a former partner of Maples and Calder. Just to elaborate further, Mr. Chairman, through you, we do have a memorandum of understanding between the ministry and Cayman Finance as well, which is another very significant advisory body, which that MOU was entered into last year. The revitalization of the relationship between Cayman Finance and government and the ministry specifically has enabled Cayman Finance to garner additional membership so that we have broader representation of the industry within that organization. It is functioning very well. We interact very frequently, and there are significant levels of advice and observations which are made through that organization to the ministry in accordance with the new structure with the MOU.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask the Minister, what are the subcommittees of this group or this council?
Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, I assume the member is referring to the Financial Services Legislative.
Yes,
Committee.
and I think you said that it's a group, and then those are split up into subgroups. So I'm asking what the subcommittees are tasked.
Understand. As I was saying earlier, Mr. Chairman, the committee exists. That has been appointed. The membership of the subcommittees in relation to areas of specialization is essentially are sort of co-opted members. So that is very fluid. There's no specific composition, and the government hasn't been involved in defining the membership in relation to that. Those committees and those members are brought on on a voluntary basis for the areas of specific specialization. So, for example, if the Financial Services Legislative Committee is looking at amendments to the trust law, they would create a subcommittee, or they already do have a subcommittee formed where they have members who are specialized in the areas of trust. They also have certain representatives from the Society of Trust and Estates Practitioners, STEP. So they bring relevant expertise to addressing the particular questions that they're looking at, whether they're trying to resolve issues, identify areas where amendments can be made to improve the products and the legal regime to make the jurisdiction more marketable, or whether they're working specifically on wholesale revisions to a law, or indeed a new law which reflects an entirely new product.
And Mr. Chairman, can I ask if these are tasked with producing draft legislation?
Mr. Chairman, through you, the FSLC are not necessarily specifically tasked by government in that respect. They will identify areas of their own initiative that they think are important to the jurisdiction, to improve the product, to resolve any particular issues that are having either a problem in terms of convenience or in terms of marketability of the jurisdiction, in terms of competitiveness. For example, other jurisdictions may create products that are more marketable or have gained traction within the global marketplace in which we operate. So they will identify those. We will have discussions with them about their agenda and what it is they're focused on, and they will work to create the initial draft legislation, which is then reviewed and considered on ultimately it will go to, as I said, legislative drafting for their final finishing touches after it has gone through the cabinet approval process in terms of drafting instructions. Once legislative drafting has completed their work in relation to, just like any other piece of legislation, they will advise the ministry that it is in a form which is appropriate to now go to cabinet. And at that point, it may be submitted to cabinet for approval, for publication, and presenting in this honorable house.
Maybe I missed something there. I got too much. But I believe the minister said that it first goes to cabinet and then to the draft and then back to cabinet. Is that?
Mr. Chairman, I was just explaining that the initial draft that is prepared by the FSLC would essentially form a part of the drafting instructions that go to the legislative drafting department. So that is approved by cabinet as instructions to go to that department. Once they have completed their work, they would then advise the ministry that they have a draft in relation to that which is appropriate to continue in the process.
Mr. Chairman, now I understand it, but I didn't hear the draft and instructions that goes to cabinet that it form part of that. Now, I would assume that this Financial Services Committee has, or should I ask, have they considered, because I don't see it in the legislative measures for this year, the legal practitioner's law?
Mr. Chairman, to the member through you, the FSLC themselves do not have that on their agenda. It is a matter that has been under review for many years, as the member knows, and it is a matter that is currently being discussed between the Caymanian Bar Association and the Cayman Islands Law Society. I anticipate that it is an issue that we will be looking at in the coming months.
Mr. McLean?
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, can I ask the minister if this government's mandate is to, what time, if it is the government's mandate to address this issue during this 4-year tenure, and what time can we expect to see a draft circulated?
Mr. Chairman, through you, it is our intention to deal with this particular matter and to work to resolving differences in relation to a new legal practitioner's law. And as I mentioned shortly, I anticipate that we will be dealing with this issue in the coming months. I'm thinking probably within the next 2 months, it is something that we will have an indication from the Caymanian Bar Association and the Cayman Islands Law Society that perhaps there have been progress and there's been a resolution of issues, not suggesting that there are issues necessarily between those two organizations, but certainly this issue has gone on, as a member knows, it's another one of these things that has gone on for more than a decade. And there is a need to improve regulation of the profession. There is a need to address a number of issues There are a number of international issues that have direct impact on the profession. And obviously indirectly that has an impact on viability for our financial services industry, because there's no doubt that a number of the professions are funnels for business coming into the jurisdiction, and obviously the legal profession is one of those important funnels, if I may refer to it in that way. So it is an issue that needs resolving. The status quo in relation to the current draft law, the current law, which I think is decades old now. It's I think in the late 60s, early 70s. There have been certain amendments to that, but there needs to be a considerable advancement of the principles set out in that. There needs to be an improvement in the way we regulate that profession, and obviously the member is aware that over the past 10 years, at the very least, there have been a number of issues that need to be addressed. I know the member has been concerned with those issues for some time himself. So there is an absolute desire to make progress on that, and it is on my personal agenda, the ministry's agenda, and we anticipate engaging in a process in the coming months to basically get to levels of public consultation and further discussion with a view to finalizing a bill which will hopefully reflect a resolution of many of the concerns that exist. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I trust that the relationship between those two organizations is not out of convenience, marriage of convenience now, like we like to talk about, because regardless of what you say now, Minister, there has been some bad blood between them two. But anyway, and within each of them as well. So politics makes strange bedfellows, not only this one. I see where you say that you're hoping within the next few months you will get it out to public consultation. That public consultation, I would assume, is in the form of a white paper.
Mr. Chairman, through you, I'm not sure of the timing. As I said, when I say in the next few months, that may be that I get an indication that, for example, the two main organizations that represent the legal profession within Cayman are in agreement, and there may be some additional work that has to be done before we can get a draft sufficient to send it out as a white paper. But ultimately, before the end of this year, I am very hopeful that we will have a draft which can be published for wider consultation as a white paper.
Mr. Chairman, I thank the Minister for that, but certainly it begs another question, and that is, even if the Minister says that they are in agreement with it, does not necessarily mean that that's what is going to come to this Parliament, I trust.
Mr. Chairman, by they, I assume the member is referring to the Cayman Bar Association and the Cayman Islands Law Society.
Yeah, the two associations that
and
really should only be one, yeah.
In that context, obviously, Mr. Chairman, I think that once we have gone through the wider public consultation process, there may be issues and factors which are brought to bear at that point, which may change perspectives and proposed resolution of issues, the way issues are resolved within any proposed draft. So, yes, to the member, it is entirely possible that there's a further evolution of any agreed issues at this point between those two organizations.
Mr. Chairman, I wish to thank the minister and to just say to the minister that he said that he knew I had some concerns about the provisions. I believe the word concern is a little understatement compared with what I had, but we'll settle for that. I am very, very concerned about this, and I look forward to the draft from the government to see what mindset the government is in at this stage, because I do know that the minister has been very involved with this as well, and whether it's concerned or excited about the provisions, I don't know, but he and I have always been at odds with this one. But I look forward to it, and I hope that it's soon rather than later.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Are there any further questions? Mr. Bush?
Yes. Every year we need to create, I guess, somewhere around 600 to 800 jobs in our economy for students leaving high school and returning from college. The financial services industry is our bread and butter, as I keep hearing people saying. It's the largest driver of GDP. What are the government plans to grow this sector, to create jobs and opportunities for our young Caymanians coming back? I'm curious as to the programs that the government have in place or intend to put in place to promote the financial industry, but to also attract new businesses to come in and help create jobs. What's in place, please?
Mr. Chairman, I thank the member for the question. Certainly the member will be aware that there have been a number of challenges over the past, well, in excess of a decade, probably nearly a decade and a half now, in relation to the financial services industry. There's a very substantial level of engagement which the government and the ministry have on many international issues. We have many, we have global, we have regional discussions and engagement that's going on. I know the member has heard about the various initiatives that the government has taken and been involved with in terms of transparency initiatives, which is really at the heart of a lot of the matters which are affecting the industry at this point. We are in a very good position in terms of our level of engagement, the level of respect that I think the jurisdiction has now as a result of that considerable engagement. So we are effectively protecting and trying to maintain the very dominant position that Cayman has in many areas. The member will know that we have a very dominant position in relation to the global mutual funds and particularly the alternate investment management area. In terms of specific domestic programs at a ministry level, we are engaged with significant players within the local industry. There is, I wouldn't say that there's an organized program, but there's a lot of discussion centering around finding employment opportunities for young Caymanians, employment opportunities for Caymanians that are upskilling themselves, getting additional qualifications, getting better training. So there's a lot of discussion. Every opportunity is taken to engage with industry players to seek that sort of ultimate outcome for Caymanians. And we also have, going back momentarily to the international arena, we have Cayman Finance that we are engaged with as well. we are, as I said in response to another question earlier, we have an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding. It's the only one that the ministry has at this point. That is in relation to promotion of the industry internationally. And we are providing some funding to Cayman Finance to assist with that. Cayman,
Mr. Chairman, just clarify for me, Mr. Minister, please. What you're saying, we have an MOU with Cayman Finance to help promote us, our financial industry. Did I understand that correctly, sir?
my apologies, Mr. Chairman. I would be grateful if the member would restate that question.
Mr. Bush?
Now, did I understand you clearly, Mr. Minister, in saying that we have an MOU with Cayman Finance to help promote our financial industry? Is that what you were saying in a nutshell, more or less, just?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yes, we do have
You
it.
continue, thank you.
So within the MOU, we're contemplating that between the ministry and Cayman Finance, there is effectively a partnership to represent industry, to promote the interests of the financial services industry in Cayman. Obviously, the net effect of that is to continue to advance the contribution that the industry makes, the already very significant contribution that the industry makes to the local economy, to our GDP, as you mentioned, and also to create additional jobs and opportunities for our own Caymanians.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bush?
Mr. Chairman, can the minister say how many international agreements now, TIEs, that we have?
Mr. Chairman, through you to the member, there are at this point 35 tax information exchange agreements with various countries. I would have to provide information later on if he wants to know the specifics of the countries, but those are bilateral agreements which at this point represent requests or obtaining information by or on request. Of course, we have other agreements which the member is probably aware of, the FATCA, US FATCA agreement, the UK FATCA style agreement, all of which, and of course there's the pre-existing European Union Savings Directive agreements, all of which involve sharing of information. Those latter ones are on an automatic exchange of information basis.
We have 35 signed, and you have how many in the pipeline?
Mr. Chairman, through you, there are 15 agreements that are currently being negotiated. These are tax information exchange agreements.
TIEs, yes. Mr. Chairman, how many, if there are any G8 countries, G20 countries, are left to be negotiated?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this point, it is only the country of Russia that remains outstanding in terms of the G20 countries that we do not have a
So all
tax
the
information
G20
exchange agreement with.
has been completed.
Sorry, G8. We have the vast majority of the G20 countries
The G8
signed up.
should fall within that G20. But so only the Russians left? That should fall in the 22?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman, through you. in terms of the original
Only-
G8
The
group
only
of
the
countries.
Russians left to deal with the Russian. All right. Mr. Chairman, what is the staff complement? I maybe this is the place to ask this. What are the outstanding staff needs of the Monetary Authority? Whether we are up to par with the expectations and the work that is called upon for the Monetary Authority to do? Oh, that's a fair question. Do have a word, but that's fair.
Mr. Chairman, I wonder if there is a specific heading in relation to the Monetary Authority. I wonder if the member would prefer to wait for that.
Well, if you got, all right, we can wait till we get there. I wanted to ask about beneficial ownership and that agreement, since we were talking about agreements, Mr. Chairman, where you reached with that particular matter, beneficial ownership.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy the member has clarified what he's really interested on that particular issue. The question of beneficial ownership, the question of beneficial ownership.
I know what you're talking about. Anyway, go ahead.
In the context of the question of beneficial ownership, I assume the member is referring specifically to the issue of which is being promulgated by the UK Prime Minister, Mr. Cameron,
The one that we
of having
gave a
a
commitment to?
central public
Sorry?
register, having a central public register for beneficial owners
That's the central issue, yes,
of
but it's
Cayman,
beneficial ownership that it affects.
of companies and other legal structures. I think the member will or may know that we've had a recent visit from a team from the UK government, which comprised of members of the UK Treasury, the Customs Department, the Metropolitan Police, actually also members of the Cabinet Advisory Group.
Big interest.
That meeting, though they were here on Monday to Wednesday of this week, so they were engaged with the ministry, they were engaged with the private sector in various discussions, and they were also engaged with the Attorney General's office and his anti-money laundering unit as well. So as well as the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority in terms of the local regulator. Though the net result of those meetings was that they gained a much better understanding of the issues which are relevant to Cayman, the concerns which are relevant to Cayman as a jurisdiction, the extent to which we really are are leading many jurisdictions around the world in our compliance regime. So I think overall it was a positive result. They have gone away. Obviously, there will, the purpose of the visit wasn't to resolve any particular issues. It was just really to communicate on both sides the various perspectives. I think they have gone away with a much better understanding, and I'm certainly very grateful to the members of the private sector, the ministry, Cayman Islands Monetary Authority, who engaged in that process.
Mr. Chairman, he didn't still say whether there was any discussion on the central registry, the beneficial ownership thing. He said about a visit. I'm glad to hear about a visit, but was that discussed, or was a visit to reassure themselves that we were what we said we were or are? Because they've been told out 1,100,000 times, and now how come down here find that out? So must have come to look for something else.
Mr. Chairman, through you, obviously, they did come with a particular agenda, and that was to promote the Prime Minister's vision that the way to achieve an appropriate level of transparency in the business world is to have a public central register of beneficial ownership.
So they came with that for that purpose.
That
All of
is
them.
correct.
All of them. They came for that purpose.
That is correct, through you, Mr. Chair. But as I said, a part of it was to communicate their message, communicate that agenda, communicate the importance to which the importance which the Prime Minister has placed on that particular agenda, but also to understand very specifically in a face-to-face way, rather than simply looking at, provisions within our laws, as to and to gain a really good understanding of the level of compliance culture that is very deep and entrenched within this jurisdiction.
Oh, yes. Well, I guess they found out that they had to travel to do that. I guess they found out they had to spend money to do that. I hope they paid me, didn't pay. But anyway, I know they found out that they had to travel to find out if that's the depth they were looking for, because all the agreements, all the international agreements, all our agreements with them are in place, and all the laws they are sent to. So I don't understand. It's good for them to talk face to face. I still think they came for something else. Maybe you didn't see it, but we'll find out one of these days.
As I said, Mr. Chairman, that their specific agenda was to discuss
And so you have,
the
Mr.
Central
Chairman,
Public Register.
the minister don't have any knowledge of where they will go with the central registry matter. That hasn't been communicated as yet. That was only Wednesday of this week, you're saying.
Monday to Wednesday of this week. I'm sorry, perhaps I can ask the member for clarification as to what he means when he says where they will go.
Well, they have made the point that they want to see it in place, the central registry. You said they came for this look-see. So, well, that's what I'm asking, if you were able to get any communication from them as yet, or any indication from them as to where they plan to go with the issue, or are they satisfied that that's not something that would be of use to us?
I think it would be very optimistic, Mr. Chairman, through you, for us to think that they're satisfied that they can leave us alone on this particular issue.
You can be optimistic, but McKee will not. But
They are certainly still intent on promoting this concept. It is not something that, it's not as if they're focused on Cayman alone. It is an issue that exists across the globe. There is no consensus as to any particular international standard on this issue. If there was, Cayman would be in the process of complying with it at this point. We're not afraid of regulation. If there's a level playing field and there is an international standard that everyone is adhering to, then clearly we will be adhering to that standard. But it is an issue that they have to promote within the current G7. They have to promote it within the G20. And the Prime Minister himself has basically taken the position that the UK is going to lead on this issue. So they are going around to all the overseas territories. They've gone to the Crown dependencies as well. And they are attempting to promote this issue within the UK's own territories as well as on a global basis. And they're proposing to lead the way on it.
Mr. Chairman, I would hope that our officials here will certainly tell them that we're not interested. There are big countries that not agreeing with the UK. I understand that. And I hope that we're not going to play guinea pig and jump out there to sign any agreements, but we can put it in place to show them how good we are. We are much better than them. Our regulations are 1,000 times better. Any problem we get down here most of the time is them send them down here. They don't want to hear that, but that's the fact. And Mr. Chairman, you don't need to start yet. We're not finished. Mr. Chairman, I would hope that, I know insult, Mr. Chairman, but it is really a serious one. Knowing that they sent that whole delegation down here, that's not for nothing. That's not for nothing. Certainly from my standpoint, and I guess they know that, that's why they always looking into my phone, they ain't got no support with that with me. None. And I am only one vote right now, but possibly 3, maybe 5.
Mr.
And so, Mr. Chairman, I just want to point out that that central registering, far as what I can understand of it, would be the death knell for us. So I hope that one and all understands that.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. Are there any further questions?
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
I wonder if the minister can say, I hear him say that they are promoting this within the overseas territories, crown dependencies, and England, and globally. Wow, Prime Minister getting powerful nowadays. Does he know of any other countries other than those that they have control over, including themselves, that they are promoting this and have come to agreement with?
Mr. Chairman, through you, at this point, it appears that the European Union Parliament are promoting, and they've adopted certain principles which promote a central register. I think which includes accessibility by the public. It seems that France and Italy in particular are supporting that. It is not clear that there is a significant amount of buy-in or support across the rest of the European Union at this point.
So Mr. Chairman, is it that Dr. Cameron is the driving force behind this? And since he taken up the European Union flag and running with it, I want to know which other countries is supporting his run.
That's why he lost that elections up there.
Maybe. That's what I'm asking. If you are aware, since he has the flag wrapped around him, the EU flag, Parliament flag wrapped around him, which other countries are running alongside him? Or is he just doing this to show that he is committed to the EU and refresh his popularity in England, in the UK?
Mr. Chairman, through you to the member. I think it's very clear that the Prime Minister is wrapping himself in the UK flag as opposed to the EU flag. But he certainly has been pursuing the support of the EU on this particular issue. And as I said earlier, there are 2 countries, France and Italy in particular, who are in agreement. There is actually a bit of a distinction between the EU's perspective on it and the UK's perspective. The UK initially did not intend, and I believe they would not wish to have a central public register in relation to interest within trusts. The EU have less of a history with the Anglo-Saxon principles of trust, and their position is that it should include trusts as well. So there is that distinction between their respective positions, but overall, in relation to companies and other legal structures other than trusts, there is agreement amongst them that, well, at least amongst those three particular countries, the UK, France, and Italy, that there should be a central public register. Now, the level of support amongst other European Union countries is uncertain at this point.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask the Minister if he gets an indication from these delegations and, or from the Minister in the UK that they're going to extend that same objection that they have for trust in England down to us? For trust being outside of the beneficial ownership registry.
Mr. Chairman, through you to the member, what the UK is promoting does not include trust in terms of a public register. So what they are promoting to the overseas territories and the Crown dependencies is the same, i.e. it doesn't include trust as part of a register which contains beneficial ownership, which is publicly available.
Why do we think that England is, or the Prime Minister is not supporting trust being a part of a central register? Trust mechanisms.
Mr. Chairman, through you to the member, it's been many years since I've been involved in the practice of trust law. But I imagine it is, as I said earlier, it is founded in Anglo-Saxon principles of trust. There is a very, very long history going back centuries. It is very ingrained, and it is a complex set of areas in which there may be complex arrangements of beneficial interests within trusts, and having a central register might be very, very complicated in that particular area with the numbers of potential beneficial interests that could exist under certain types of trusts. So I think there is a reluctance to engage in that discussion in that area because of the level of complexity. There may be other principles that escape me at this point, and I apologize to the member if that is the case. But I think that is, in general, an explanation of what he's looking for.
Mr. Chairman, if nothing else, in the 1 year that the Minister has been there, and his many trips to England, they have really turned him into a diplomat. So
Mr.
I will-
McLean, let's stick to the specific questions.
Well, he's very diplomatic with his answers. Anyway, Mr. Chairman, I thank the Minister. Is this the same team that we were asked if we had been notified of coming, that they, Mr. Chairman, by the Minister, the recent asked me if I had been notified of this team addressing beneficial ownership, if I had been notified that they wanted to meet with all MLAs, and not me in particular. Is this the same team?
I can't recall specifically what we discussed, but I do recall at one point I had a conversation with you to ask whether you were aware of a visiting team.
Because they wanted to meet with members of Parliament, yeah. It might have been another one.
No, not this particular team. I may have said to you that there may have been meetings with members of Parliament and industry, but I can't recall specifically if I asked if you had been.
But if I could refresh his memory, this is 2 weeks ago, maybe?
Perhaps it may have been some.
So I thought this was the team.
Yeah, it might not.
In view of the Minister saying that he was comfortable with what transpired with this team, and he believed they left with a better understanding of what we do here. I believe that paraphrase, and I think that's what the minister said. How beneficial does the minister think that will be to us?
Well, I think, Mr. Chair, through you, I think any opportunity we have to raise the level of engagement and level of understanding of any elements of the UK government or any other government or any other supranational organization, any opportunity we have to raise the level of understanding and knowledge is very useful. Clearly, as I said before, they have not gone away thinking, okay, the Cayman Islands are fine, we don't need to bother having any further discussions with them on this issue. This is an issue that the UK feel they are leading on. They are willing to push the agenda. How far, we will see. We will see the kind of reaction they get globally. But it's been going on for since last October. And it is a process that they're engaged in worldwide with many countries. But I think, as I said, the benefits are always going to be positive to continue a constructive engagement and discussion on any issues. Putting up a stone wall and saying, no, we don't want to talk to you is not going to be constructive and may well end up in negative consequences down the road. I think we've tried that in the past, and it isn't positive for the country.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, we'll proceed to the vote. All those in favor of FSC 7, an internationally competitive financial services industry for $2,027,481, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Aye. And those against, no. FSC 8, a business climate conducive to local commerce, $512,787, found on page 158 of the annual plan and estimates. Are there any questions? Mr. McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I wonder if the minister can tell us how many entrepreneurs, small business owners, we have assisted over the last year.
Mr. Chairman, through you, over the last year, the Department of Commerce and Investment has assisted somewhere in the region of 5 new clients per month. The number of active small business clients are probably in the region of 55 at this point.
Is that 55 per month?
5 per month additional, 3 to 5 per month additional new clients, and at this point around 55 total that are being assisted by the department.
Mr. Chairman, can the minister explain to us what assistance means? Define assistance.
Mr. Chairman, through you, in relation to the question the member has asked, effectively, there are counseling services which are provided by the department. There are workshops which are put on by the department over the course of each year, and there is a specific small business event which is put on annually to promote the interests of micro and small businesses, to allow them to have exposure to the marketplace, to get prospective customers and clients coming in to see them.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. McLean.
can I ask the Minister if do we assist entrepreneurs coming in, new people, ideas, who the department assists and continue to follow up on? They may start their small business and come to us to start a small business, and we give them assistance. How many of those, 3 to 5 per month, is that?
Mr. Chairman, I'd be grateful if you would allow the Chief Officer to respond on this.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, through you. The process that we've been...
Before you do that, please state your full name and title for the record.
Dax Basteo, Chief Officer, Minister of Financial Services, Commerce and Environment.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, for the past few years, the program that the department has been running is one of business counseling primarily. How this operates is that when we have entrepreneurs and small businesses who are perhaps getting into new businesses, they will come to the department to seek sort of one-on-one assistance. The process is one where the trained staff at the department go through the various concepts, for example, business plans, how to market the business, sort of building financial statements and so forth, and allowing the business owners themselves to understand how to run their own business. So it's not a consulting service where they're told what to do. They learn how to do it for themselves. Under that model of work, which we've adopted based on what's been done both in the US and the UK, it's up to the business owners and the entrepreneurs to come back to the department when they need more assistance. So from that standpoint, while the department may see on average 3 to 5 per month, the relationship can span many different years. As various issues come up, the entrepreneurs then can come back to the department for a follow-up and other questions to be answered.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm trying to see if there is what percentage, if we have been following these, what percentage of them stay in business and
Mr. Chairman, what we do is we track the businesses through the trade and business licensing system, and what we found over the last few years is approximately 50% dropout after 2 years.
I'll get into it. I need to go, Mr. Chairman. Taking a little while, but I get in there. I'm not going to assume anything here. What is the ownership makeup of those businesses that we try to help? The Caymanian, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, most of the clients coming through the department are sole traders, and a very high percentage are Caymanian.
No, that's not the answer I'm looking for. You know that, right? I want the actual percentage that is Caymanian. And I wrote down one with 2 big zeros behind it, with that little sign that go like that and like that.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just add a comment at the moment. I suspect that we would not have that specific number, but the fact is that businesses that are assisted by the department are going to be businesses that are legally licensed to conduct business. So in the vast majority of cases, that those are going to be probably wholly owned by Caymanians. But there may be instances where they are not wholly owned by Caymanians. We just don't have the specific information to confirm at this point. I can commit to the member that we would try to clarify and get that information to the member.
Mr. Chairman, when the minister said that there will be instances where they're not wholly owned by Caymanians, is he referring to the provision in the business license where it can be 60-40? Is he referring to that?
Mr. Chair, through you, effectively, yes, that is a part of it. There's also the local companies control law,
LCCL.
LCCL. That is another potential avenue through which there may be less than 60% Caymanian ownership and control. But I say that in the sense that that is just a potential. We are unable to confirm very specifically or definitively at this point that none of those have been members of the group which the DCI has been providing services to. I suspect the chances of that are fairly limited, but I can't exclude that potential.
Mr. Chairman, I really don't know why we would be advising LCCL, but I mean, anything can happen around here nowadays. Mr. Chairman, to the minister, he says there's approximately 50% success rate on what they have been following. Mr. Chairman, we all know that businesses fail within the first 5 years, and more so within the first 3. And that's evident by their statistics, which is 50% within the first 2. Mr. Chairman, I don't think it's the fault of the department that 50% is failing, but I believe if there was a further effort and a new goal and an objective for that department to follow up on these things, all of them, whether they're successful, the 50% that we know will be successful or not, what are the chances of them all succeeding, or a greater percentage of them succeeding, if we give that department a different mandate to help manage these businesses? And by manage, I mean, Mr. Chairman, keep an eye on them once a month and assist them with advice I'm talking about.
Mr. Chairman, through you, I think the bottom line in relation to this is the bottom line. It's the cost, and it's an inability to provide sufficient capacity levels, and by that I mean trained staff with the ability to perhaps take the kind of proactive approach that the member is referring to. I'm not sure that I'm not aware of many countries around the world that take such a proactive approach. Certainly, we're proactive in the sense that we advertise, we try to get small businesses that need assistance, that have an idea and want to set up a business to come and talk to the ministry. But we don't have the capacity at this point to provide continuing assistance on a proactive basis by going out and checking on them once a month or every 6 months or every quarter, whatever. And at the end of the day, it is a question of the owners being upfront and coming to ask the department for assistance if they need it.
Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate that, but we all recognize that the strength and the backbone of this country must be in small businesses, medium-sized businesses. We all appreciate that. Is it possible, considering the restraints that are presented with staff or what have you, is it possible then for the department to tell these people, to bring in their accounts at the end of the month, within a week of the next month, and they can look over them? At least you must have enough staff, and they just look over it and do a view of it. You mean you only got one person ever? Is that possible? I mean, to assist, to start developing this industry? Because I understand, Mr. Chairman, they say 50% successful, and I understand half a loaf is better than none, but there's another half that is suffering too that maybe we can assist with.
Mr. McLean, you would accept that even with all the support in the world, there are market conditions that determine the success and failure of a business.
But in the absence of advice, they may fail much quicker.
Mr.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, through you.
Again?
Obviously, it relates back to the original answer of I think one of capacity for us. It would be difficult. For example, if we have 55 current clients, it would be difficult to commit to reviewing financial statements or accounts for 55 clients on a monthly or even quarterly basis to give them any meaningful sort of advice in relation to that. I appreciate the members' perspective on small businesses and the significance of that. I think the fact that the government has in this budget and in its proposals outlined support for small businesses in terms of concessions and incentives reflects the fact that we acknowledge and we understand very specifically the significance of small businesses to the local economy, to the employment opportunities. They reflect the opportunities for growth in the economy, for the creation of new jobs. So we are very much committed to supporting them. We have to, there is a general acknowledgement that we're all trying to do more with less, given the cuts that we have been mandated to do. So there are considerable challenges in balancing an effective approach on this. It is not feasible, I would imagine, at this point for us to commit to or to engage in trying to review accounts. There is also the matter that many small businesses themselves do not actually produce significant accounts or any meaningful accounts. So it would be difficult to engage in that sort of process. We would have to help them to build that capacity first and then engage in the reviews as suggested by the member. So we will continue to do whatever we can within the resources that we have. We will continue to support small businesses because we recognize the importance and the significance of them to the country and to the economy.
And Mr. Chairman, that's precisely it. It is those that you get in, come into your door from the beginning, that you can show them how to do their accounts and have it. And I understand, but I'm not trying to be disrespectful or embarrassing or anything. Those are the ones I'm talking about. When you get them, you can show them how to do it, and then you can. That's the reason for once a month if they're making it wrong. But Mr. Chairman, may I ask the minister, what's wrong? Every day we got more and more young Caymanians coming out with finance degrees, not necessarily professionals yet, but finance degrees, and they come home and they're searching for a job to practice, and so they can go on to their thing. Is there anything wrong with us hiring them and to assist a few of them, 6, 8 them, just coming home? It's good experience for them, and then they can move on to something else to assist with that kind of development of small business. I've always thought that was the right way to go about it. They're coming home, they got to go look for the big 8 or big 4 or whatever it is. Put them over there, and you're not paying them much anyhow. They're just getting into the door, and that's the stepping stone for them, so to speak. Maybe we can look at that. I'm asking the minister.
Mr. McLean, I think they've gotten the gist of the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would certainly welcome that sort of opportunity. Experience obviously plays a big part in being an effective counselor and advising small business owners, but certainly people with specific relevant degrees, whether or not they have any particular experience, are going to be better than nothing. But I think the bottom line for us at this point is the capacity constraints that we face in terms of headcount and the overall cost of the civil service. So what some of the discussions we've had, Mr. Chair, to the member, center around seeing whether we can get people to act on a voluntary basis to perhaps assist and form a group who are willing to, perhaps retired accountants or something along those lines, to see if they can assist and contribute in that sort of way. We haven't specifically made progress in that area, but it's a discussion that we've had, recognizing the capacity constraints that we have.
Mr. Miller, you had a question, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me apologize to you for being late. I was starting a revolution in Northside, hosting a Father's Day for the primary school, and we had 50 fathers turned up this morning for a Father's Day breakfast at the Civic Center for the Northside School. That has to be a revolution, and I'm going to challenge each and every sitting member of this assembly for next year, Father's Day, find a primary school, host a breakfast the Friday before it, and let's get the fathers out and get them involved. Let's continue this revolution. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question is...
Before you continue, Mr. Miller, I too was at a breakfast this morning at Georgetown Primary School, and I think by sheer population we exceeded your 50.
Of course, well, that's to be expected. That's to be expected.
And Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to tell the Northside member that Sir John Campbell Primary School parent teachers are well attuned to the issues, and we might not have a Father's Day, but I can tell you how many other days, and the fathers and mothers are there, and I certainly want to put that on record.
All right, now that we finished measuring swords,
No, we're not measuring. This has nothing to do with measuring swords, but we're just trying to give the men a little exposure here, because we get the women down here quite often being advocated for. So I'm just trying to advocate for the men.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Let's get into the saber rattling now.
No. So it's not about, just about getting involved. So my question to the minister is, on the description you talk about policy-driven legislative framework that enables local businesses. In this legislation that's being drafted, is there any consideration being given to amendments to the banking laws that would ease credit facilities for small businesses?
Mr. Chair, through you, in respect of the services which this department provides, those particular elements are probably beyond its specific scope. In general, the government has meetings from time to time with many of the banks that operate within the local industry to discuss perhaps addressing some of these issues. But clearly those are issues that I think from a regulatory perspective are difficult to force upon an operating entity in that area and providing lending facilities.
Mr. Chairman, I mean, I don't happen to agree with you, but of course, it's going to be difficult to do because most of the banks don't want to ease up on the only 80% of assets plus a personal guarantee, plus your mama guarantee, plus your dada guarantee, right? But I think that the Legislative Assembly has to look at this legislation to help facilitate small people. And if you have a limited liability company, it should be a limited liability company. You shouldn't need a personal guarantee if you're only taking 80% of my assets.
Mr. Chair, through you, I think in terms of a review of how this particular matter is approached around the world, one might observe that governments will implement programs that support the availability of credit to small businesses through various approaches, certain types of backstop guarantees, basically things along those lines. But the government is obviously, as a member would know, not in a position to engage in that kind of approach at this point. Certainly down the road it may be possible, if there is a need at that point, to increase the availability of credit to small businesses. But it would be difficult to do it in the current environment.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I agree, and I don't propose that government give these banks any more guarantees. We got guarantees out there now that we can't even quantify on the housing, right? But certainly the government can adopt a legislative position that will ease credit for small businessmen, for small businesses in particular. Because the cocktail parties ain't working. We've been doing that for 30 years. Right? And the power lunches and the cocktail parties and the meetings that we have with them. They ain't doing it. But every time they publish their bottom line, right, they're making millions and millions of dollars, right? And the socioeconomic environment around them is deteriorating daily, but they continue to make profit. So I believe that it is time for the government to look at some intervention through legislation. And second question, Mr. What legislation then are we spending 750 to 1,200 hours drafting?
Mr. Chair, through you, the department is engaged in reviewing the trade and business licensing law with a view to developing a new draft bill in that respect to do a variety of things, but effectively overall improving efficiency, improving accessibility and convenience, putting a lot of the services online, and obviously a number of specific things to help small businesses and make it more convenient for them, and to address a number of long-standing issues that have existed and come to the attention of government over time. There is the review of the local companies control law that is going to be carried out. This is broader than just small business. This is encompassing the whole area of commerce, anything relevant to that. But it will just to continue in relation to the member's original question. There is local companies control law review. There is the liquor licensing law review. We're also reviewing the special economic zones law.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, but they're all listed under FSC 10, not FSC 8.
Mr. Chair, through you, FSC 8 is more the broader policy issues which are relevant to the whole area of commerce. FSC 10 is more specific in relation to the administrative processes which are involved in business licensing, for example, in a variety of areas around that.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bush?
Mr. Chairman, I want to find out from the minister, what's the staff complement now? This environment we talk about, we're doing more for less, and we've had to cut back on all the staffing. So I'll stop there just to find out what the staff complement.
Mr. Chairman, thank the member for the question through you. The current staff complement is numbers 8, and there is within this budget, there's a recruitment proposal for 3 additional members of staff.
8 for what particular area?
Mr. Chairman, I'd be obliged if the Chief Officer would answer in respect of that.
Mr. Chairman, 8 current staff right now, and that's primarily on the licensing side to issue licenses, trade business licenses. 1 member from the enforcement side. We're currently starting a process to recruit 2 members on the small business assistance side, and then in this coming financial year to hire 3 additional staff members to continue to fill the gap in the capacity issues we're experiencing in that department.
How many did you have before, Mr. Chairman?
In the last year, at the start of last year, it was around 12.
Just in that unit,
In that department.
in the department, entire department
That's right.
of commerce, and now you have 8. So some left? Yes.
That's correct, Mr. Chair. We've had some members of staff who have resigned and left. Unfortunately, the level of capacity we have is greatly insufficient for the level of work and services which the department has been providing. So many staff members have been under a tremendous amount of pressure, and that has led to people seeking opportunities elsewhere at this point.
That's the point I was leading to, that we're talking about we're doing well in cutting back. That seems to be the buzzword today, cutting back, doing more for less. But you can't expect that people are machines, and the administration has to recognize that. So I would hope that the staff complements which such a unit needs, as you can hear the things that at least legislators expect. And when vast majority of times when you hear legislators asking for something is because people are pushing them to get services. And everybody wants services, and that's the problem with the whole entire civil service, as I said in my budget speech. The private sector wants all these services, but they don't expect that they can hire anybody. I don't know who they expect the people are. They think the machines, they must think they not got families they got to get home to. They think they have various problems. It doesn't seem that to be an environment. I certainly would not want to be going into the environment of the civil service, not under the conditions that I hear people talking about, and that ministers, they have to do the same thing that we face. They want to cut back. Cut back, and the head of civil service making all kinds of statements, put statements out there to please whomever they want to please, but expect us to get the services. How are you going to get the services if we don't get the people? Computer needs somebody to input.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. Are there any further questions with respect to this particular appropriation? If there are no further questions, then all those in favor of FSC 8, a business climate conducive to local commerce for $512,787, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. FSC 10, on page 159, a robust, efficient regime for the registration of corporate and vital information and the licensing of businesses, $2,770,354 on page 159. Are there any questions? Mr. Miller?
Thank you. To you, Mr. Chairman.
Jesus.
What if I could ask the member, when I get a liquor license issued by the Liquor Licensing Authority, is the liquor licensing on me, or is the liquor license on the facility that I plan to operate?
Mr. Chair, through you to the member, the current configuration of the liquor licensing law provides that the license is in the name of an individual who is going to operate and be involved with the management of the business, as opposed to an entity that is operating, that the business is being operated through.
But I can't get that license unless the facility, not me. The facility is what is examined in order to qualify me for the license. It is the facility which has to get planning permission, which has to get public health permission, all the permissions. How is it possible for me to have a liquor license if I don't have a facility operating currently?
Mr. Chairman, through you to the member, I thank the member for the question. As I said earlier, the law currently contemplates that the license is issued to an individual. At the time of issue of the license, specifically, I don't believe that they have to demonstrate that they have a specific premises. So the process in relation to the premises and the facilities that are available at those premises comes under the Central Planning Authority. Now, I would say at this point that this is a particular issue that we're concerned with in addressing any proposed amendments to or wholesale change to the form of the liquor licensing law and regime that we have at this point.
How then is it possible for the Liquor Licensing Board to refuse to renew a license for somebody who has not completed the examinations, such as public health and planning facility?
Mr. Chairman, I think the short answer is that the current law allows the board for established businesses and licenses which are being operated in respect to those businesses to take into consideration whether there are whether there is, appropriate compliance with planning issues, fire compliance with the fire recommendations and conditions, public health, that sort of stuff, in considering whether they would renew a particular license.
How then is it possible for somebody to get a license renewed that doesn't have a facility that they're operating that can be examined?
I think, Mr. Chairman, through you, the answer is that the way the law is currently structured, if the licensee is not utilizing that license at this point, and not conducting operations at a particular establishment or premises, those are obviously not factors that can be taken into account. So the concern is, from the board's perspective, given the current regime and the current provisions of the law, the concern would be to ensure that where an establishment is conducting business under a particular license, that it is doing it in accordance with any other relevant laws which relate to public health and safety. If it is not operating, then obviously, as I said earlier, they don't take that into account. And perhaps there's less concern with whether or not the license should be renewed. It then becomes more a question of just paying your relevant fees and whether you're otherwise regarded as a person that should continue to have a license. But as I said earlier, Mr. Chair, from a ministry perspective, there are very real concerns with the existing provisions of the liquor licensing law, and these reflect some of the issues that we wish to have addressed.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, when can the minister give us a time frame of when the liquor license law is going to be presented to Parliament?
Mr. Chair, through you, the liquor licensing law has been under review by a committee which was appointed by myself in October last year. That committee has made a number of recommendations, and they have been working on a revision, essentially a wholesale revision to the existing liquor licensing law. We are working towards getting that in a form which can then form the basis essentially for drafting instructions to go through to legal drafting in order to get it in a form which Cabinet can then approve and have it presented in this Honourable House. The timing on that is difficult to say. The committee has to complete its work. They have, and also that I think that aspect of it can be completed within a period of a few months, a couple of months. I think there is a wider issue of the demands in relation to legislative drafting and the availability of those resources to complete that within the priorities which government is dealing with. So it is difficult to say, but it is something that we could accomplish within, say, the next six to 8 months. It is possible that it could be quicker than that. I think there have been discussions which indicate that perhaps that matter will be escalated in terms of the government priorities. So it's possible we can get it done quicker than that.
Is the ministry aware that there's a huge black market that has existed in this country for the sale and rental of licenses because the government allows individuals to maintain their business license, their liquor license, with having no facility for years and years and years and years, right? And is it, based on your answers, a fact that the advertisement that is placed in the Compass recently telling people who have existing liquor license to make sure they complete their planning inspections, their public health inspections, that there's really no need to do that. They can simply apply in their own name, right? And say, I don't have any facility today for you to inspect, but I want to renew my license.
Mr. Chair, through you to the member, I think the member might recall that in my budget contribution earlier, I specifically addressed and acknowledged the fact that there is this black market that exists, and it is a concern. The various issues in relation to the current construct of the liquor licensing law are of concern to the government, and we wish to address that. The advertisement that the member is referring to, obviously specifically related to liquor licenses that were operated in the context of existing facilities and existing premises. And I think we've covered that ground earlier, that the board, in renewing an existing liquor license where there is a facility through which it is currently operated, would look to ensuring that all those public health and safety issues are addressed. Where it is a license which is in abeyance and simply being held, and the fees are being paid, but no businesses being operated under that license, then it is just a question of them renewing the license, paying the relevant fees. So it is an area of concern, and one which we wish to see addressed.
To you, Mr. Chairman, is the member aware that the government having announced that they're lifting the moratorium on liquor license, which I assume is going to be done the usual way for a very short period of time, that people are already lining up to apply with no intentions of opening a facility, but simply having a license that they can demand $75,000 for on the market, or they can rent it for $3,000-4,000 a month. And I still don't understand your interpretation of the law that says a license can be granted to an individual who doesn't have a facility, and a person can renew a license when he is not operating a facility. What is the purpose by the board of renewing the license if the person is not operating a facility that can be examined and ensure that the protections of the public are built in, i.e. safety, hygiene, etc., etc.? I disagree with that interpretation of the law, respectfully, because I believe that those things were put in the law specifically to require those things to be in place and pass inspections before license can be renewed or granted. And I'm really concerned that the government's position is that none of those things are really that important. You just apply, pay the fee, and say, I don't have a facility, and you get a license. Did you?
Mr. Chairman, through you to the member, I think the reality is that the board is concerned about ensuring that where a license is being utilized to operate a business, that those various safety and public health issues are addressed. from their perspective, it is not relevant where there is no business being operated through that license. So unfortunately, we have somewhere in the region of 60, I think it's around 67, 65 to 67 existing liquor licenses through which no businesses are being operated. And obviously the reason people retain those and pay the fees annually in respect of those, despite the fact that they do not need the licenses and they do not operate any premises under those licenses, is the moratorium which has been in place. When I indicated in the Honourable House earlier on the issue of lifting the moratorium, what I indicated was that the government was considering this, and we have been engaged in a consultation process in relation to this. I don't think I indicated a definitive position in relation to lifting the moratorium, but I can say that if the moratorium is lifted, it is unlikely that it will be for a short period of time. It would simply be lifted, period, because it is a market distortion to have these sorts of moratoriums in place.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Bush has been waiting for a while. I'll give
And
him an
I can be
opportunity.
quick, gentlemen. I know you all want to jump in there quick. Mr. Chairman, I'm glad to hear that it wasn't a definitive decision. And I hope when you look at it, it'll be for various areas of where license can be granted. West Bay don't need any more licenses. We got enough licenses right now. Now, I know I took a big hit, probably from you too, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Minister, because I didn't support a certain license coming into West Bay. I believe that our district is sufficiently served in liquor licenses. I don't think that we need any more. The big conglomerates come in and wipe out the smaller people. And I know that we all believe that this is a free market and it's competition is good. But we still have to do some protection of these people that we claim we serve, and we claim we're protecting them, but yet the big one gets in, and boy, don't ask if they ever blame McKeever about supporting the big business. But big business tried to come into West Bay, and I refuse as minister to open it up any more than I believe that there are areas that can be served. But certainly my district is not one of them. So just bear that in mind, Mr. Minister, when you go to open it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify, I can assure the member that first of all, I have no conflict or interest in relation to any businesses which are relevant there. I had nothing to say to him in relation to that issue. I do not even consume alcohol, so it's not an area of concern for
Gentlemen,
me.
if I,
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say I wasn't accusing the minister of having any conflict as far as business is concerned. His conflict was to beat me up so he could get elected.
thank you, Mr. Bush. Mr. Miller, Mr. McLean, both you were about that. You'll give way, Mr. McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I wonder if the minister can tell us if this moratorium is lifted, will we see to it first that those 65 are put in place? The 65 that is non-operational, will we ensure or insist that they be put in place or they get cancelled within a specified period of time?
Mr. Chairman, through you, obviously these are matters of concern. I think the reality is that if there is a moratorium lifted entirely, there will no longer be any real imperative for people to maintain those licenses unless perhaps they feel that down the road the moratorium gets reimposed. But certainly within the context of the consultative process that we have engaged in, we are going to look at all these various issues and see how best to resolve them, and to see essentially whether we can resolve some of these issues within the existing framework of the liquor licensing law, or whether we need to make the amendments to the law or replace the law entirely, as I mentioned earlier, in the context of doing that.
Mr. Chairman, I thank the Minister. One of the things that is required for a liquor license is that there be a premises. I believe that's what it should be. We are issuing these things in people's names so we can hold them accountable, and that doesn't work. Even if it's in the name, it attached thereto must be a location that is operated under. Is it a requirement when that license is issued, as it is now to the individual, that it is attached to a premises, and is that the reason why? Is that the reason why we have all these? They were being operated, and then they were out of business, but they keep renewing the license.
Mr. Chair, through you, just for clarity, the member's question was whether these licenses are being taken out on a speculative basis, or whether they relate to entity or operations, establishments that had gone out of business and then were retained. I think the reality is both.
Okay.
I think if you look back at the history of licenses being granted, and certainly some of the licenses that were granted the last time the moratorium was lifted for a short period of time, I think it's undoubted that some of those licenses were essentially obtained on a speculative basis, because it represented the ability to do business, which you might not otherwise have the opportunity down the road when you're ready. So you're going to try to obtain the license at a particular time. And it may also be that it's viewed purely as an asset, as a commodity that you wish to rent or you wish to sell.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask the Minister if he can somehow commit to legislation that will require that license are not issued unless planning approval has been received, certificate of occupancy, and that is all the attending departments that would deal with that, public health and what have you, prior to a liquor license being issued. Will the Minister commit to the new law, the amended law, having that provision therein?
Mr. Chairman, through you, that is certainly the approach that the committee which has been reviewing the law is proposing. Their initial draft sort of high-level principles in relation to the law specifically addresses the point that the license should not be simply to an individual. It should be tied to a premises in the same way that you have trade and business licenses, which are typically tied to premises through which a business is operating. So that is, in principle, the approach which the department and the ministry proposes to take.
Mr. Chairman, I thank him, but you mustn't talk about business license, because they are one of them die boats use our public docks. They're not going to place either. So let's stay away from that one. But another one we need to address. I got knocks down there for that doctor thing, Dr. Basdeo. But Mr. Chairman, just with that provision in there alone, I'm going to support that bill.
Thank you, Mr. McLean.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bush just wanted to make a clarification.
Mr. Chairman, when I talked about West Bay District just now, recognizing that a big portion of 7 Mile Beach is a part of the West Bay District. West Bay District is boundary is just by the Ritz. So we recognize that that's a hotel corridor. And if you got a hotel, that's a different. I'm talking about West Bay proper. I think the minister would understand. So you would, Mr. Chairman, what I'm talking about West Bay proper in the business in West Bay, central West Bay area, West Bay proper, in the residential areas and so on. We don't need any more. Hotels, a different story.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, can the minister explain if the license is not predicated on the facility, why does a person have to apply to the board to change location? If the license is my license, why can't I just operate it anywhere that has a certificate of occupancy?
Mr. Chair, through you to the member, as I mentioned earlier, and the member knows the license is in the name of an individual. Without it being tied specifically to business premises, there's a different set of considerations, it seems, which are applied on the renewal process. Once a license is being utilized in respect of a specific premises, business premises, and businesses being operated under that license at those premises, then a change in location for the license holder or the business is a relevant factor that is taken into account by the board as to whether they should approve it or not.
How then does I, as the licensee, rent to Arden to operate a bar in East End when my original license was to operate a bar in Northside? Because that's what's happening. That's exactly what's happening.
Mr. Chairman, through you, I am extremely sympathetic to the members' perspective and concerns on this issue. This is simply an indication of the level of inadequacy and insufficient control which exists within the current regime of the liquor licensing law. And it is indicative of one of the many areas of concern. So,
Through you, Mr. Chairman.
it is, just to continue, it is a difficult issue. It is an issue of concern, but this is the way the law is structured, and this is the way the decisions have been made under this law for decades now. And it needs to be addressed. So I'm completely sympathetic to the perspective of the member.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, will the minister commit to this House? Because I believe the cycle of renewals of liquor license is September. To bring the minor amendment to the law, which I don't agree need to amend the law, because I think you can issue a policy directive, or to make a regulation under the law to say that in the renewal of liquor license in the September for the coming year, no liquor license will be renewed that does not currently operate a facility and has complied with all the laws required to get the license in the first place.
Mr. Chair, through you to the member, that approach is under consideration at this point. The previous approach was to go with the recommendations of this committee, which was reviewing the law, and to essentially do a wholesale replacement of the existing law. I suspect that, as I've mentioned earlier, that's going to take some time to complete. What we are considering at this point is whether there are any relevant amendments that can be made, need to be made, in order to effect the types of changes, such as the one the member is asking about, in the context overall of addressing some of these concerns and dealing with this question of lifting the moratorium.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that's a good legal answer. Will the minister accept a commitment from me to find out what minor amendments need to be made to the law and to deliver such a paper to his office for implementation for him prior to the September law, the September renewal of the license?
Mr. Chairman, if the member wishes to assist in this process, I have no objection to that. But it is something that is currently being considered.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, you have more questions? Okay.
Under the liquor licensing, and this is an enforcement issue, for powder boats, it is my understanding that they are not supposed to be serving liquor within a quarter mile of the shoreline. Is that true?
I believe that is accurate, Mr. Chair.
Can the minister explain to me why, after at least 4 years of complaining, that certain powder boats come in to the Rum Point area, particularly where people who own boats take their families on weekend and give away, or the liquor is consumed less than within the 200-foot mark that is put down by the Department of Environment to the shore, and there are 200 yards, and there is no enforcement that I can possibly get to done, because
Mr. Chair, through you, that is likely to be one of the issues relevant to capacity for the department to be involved in the enforcement of the liquor licensing laws in this respect. It is something that we will certainly perhaps focus on, but I can't guarantee you that we are in a position to have the staff and capacity to do it on an ongoing basis, on a regular basis. We can have a look at it and see whether there are operators coming in and doing that on any particular occasion. But it's not something that I could personally commit to, that we have the resources to continue to monitor in terms of enforcement.
through you, Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Miller?
I'm waiting on him. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not really too concerned about monitoring it every weekend. What I would like you to do is come up to this Sunday and enforce the law and cancel the license for the people who are breaking the law.
Mr. Chair, through you to the member, as I said earlier, the department is capacity constrained in terms of enforcement officers to deal with this issue. Unfortunately, the police are equally constrained from their perspective in their ability to lend much assistance in this respect. We can certainly try to arrange an opportunity to address this specific issue. I'm not certain that the operators that you're referring to, I'm very sympathetic to the issue you have and the concern you have. I am particularly bothered about the levels of noise and trash that occurs and bottles being thrown in the water and whatnot, but from those sorts of operations, but I'm not sure that those are specifically licensed entities with licenses under the liquor licensing law. We can ascertain the extent to which that is the case.
Through you to the minister, can the minister say whether there are any party boats operating in the North Sound that have liquor license and dancing and music license?
Mr. Chairman, through you, there are boats that have liquor licenses, but we are an island surrounded by water. It's not possible to say specifically where they're operating. Some may be on the 7 Mile Beach corridor. Some may come into the North Sound.
What supervision is the enforcement arm of the liquor licensing law provided for the community over these party boats that have music and dancing license and liquor licensing law?
Mr. Chairman, I think it might be useful if I commit to having a discussion with the member. As a member wishes, I was simply going to suggest that we do not have the information to confirm the specific licensees and where they operate, where they typically operate at this point. But there are the capacity constraints that I mentioned, both in terms of the staff for the department to deal with enforcement issues, as well as the ability of the police department to assist in respect to that.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, can the minister state how often, or if ever, given the constraints that you're operating on, doing less with less, that a party boat or a boat that has a liquor license or a music and dancing license has been inspected in the last 2 years, other than for renewal of the license?
Mr. Chair, through you, I have to say that with the information I have to hand, we're not in a position to confirm whether any specific boats that the member is referring to have been, which are licensed, have been inspected. In general, I can indicate that there have been 450 inspections over the course of the last year, and matters which have been complaints essentially that have been filed, and matters which have been dealt with. No, in general, under the liquor licensing law.
Is the member saying that the Liquor License Enforcement Department does not keep records individually on boats or on land facilities that they get complaints about? It's just lumped together as a total number?
Mr. Chairman, the numbers that I indicated earlier reflect the information we have to hand at this point. The information which the member is seeking can be obtained and can be provided. Those records are maintained in the fashion in which they can be broken down in the way the member is seeking. If the member wishes, I can commit to provide the information to him. Thank you.
Would the minister commit to providing me with the number of inspections that have been done on each boat that is licensed for liquor, for music and dancing, and the number of complaints on each boat for publication, not for my private use?
Mr. Chairman, through you to the member, we'd be happy to commit to providing that information to the member.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? If there are no further questions, we'll proceed to taking the vote. So all those in favor of FSC 10, a robust, efficient regime for the registration of corporate and vital information and the licensing of businesses for $2,770,354, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. I think this is a convenient time to take our lunch break. We will now suspend proceedings for approximately 1 hour as we take our lunch break.